Hey there, and welcome back to Midnight Sleep Crime. I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know many of you listen to these stories as you drift off to sleep. Before you get comfortable, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is there. I always enjoy reading your comments. Now, settle in, relax, and enjoy tonight's story. Story 1. The photograph was taken in 1989. The murder happened in 1997. That alone should have been impossible, because the victim appearing in the photograph wasn't born until 1994. Yet there he was, standing clearly in the background, smiling at the camera, 5 years before he existed. The discovery. The case began in a small town outside Islamabad. Not with a body, not with a suspect. With a box of old photographs discovered inside the attic of an abandoned farmhouse. The farmhouse had belonged to the Malik family for generations. After the last owner died, relatives began clearing the property. That's when they found the box. Hundreds of old Polaroids. Birthdays, picnics, family gatherings, normal memories. Until they reached photograph 47. And everything changed. The picture. The image showed a summer barbecue. Dated August 1989. The date was printed directly on the original Polaroid. 8 adults stood around a picnic table. Children played in the yard. A dog slept beneath a tree. Normal. Except for one person. Standing near the back fence. Watching the camera. A teenage boy. Nobody recognized him. The face. When relatives brought the photo to police, nobody expected much. Until Detective Omar Siddiqui looked closer. Then his face went pale. Because he recognized the boy immediately. A murder victim. The teenager in the photograph looked exactly like Hamza Malik. A 16-year-old boy murdered in 1997. 8 years after the photograph was taken. The old case. Hamza's murder had never been solved. His body was discovered inside a drainage tunnel near the town outskirts. No witnesses. No suspects. No weapon. The case eventually went cold. And now, somehow, Hamza appeared in a photograph taken years before his birth. Impossible evidence. Omar assumed the image was fake. Manipulated. Altered. Except forensic analysis proved otherwise. The Polaroid was authentic. The chemicals matched 1989 manufacturing. The image showed no signs of tampering. The photograph was real. The family denies everything. When police interviewed surviving relatives from the barbecue, every answer made things worse. Nobody remembered the boy. Yet everyone agreed on one detail. The figure had always been there, even in their memories of the day. The woman who changed her story. One elderly aunt became visibly nervous during questioning. At first she denied knowing anything. Then she asked a strange question. Did he still die in the tunnel? Silence filled the room. Omar stared at her. What do you mean still? The woman immediately refused to speak further. The tunnel. Omar reopened the old murder file. The drainage tunnel where Hamza died had long been sealed. But something in the photograph bothered him. The background. Near the fence. Behind the mysterious teenager. A structure appeared partially visible. A concrete entrance. Almost identical to the tunnel where Hamza's body would later be found. The hidden roll. While searching the attic again, investigators discovered a second undeveloped film roll hidden inside a wall cavity. Unlike the Polaroids, this roll had never been processed. Forensic labs developed it carefully. 23 images emerged. The first 22 showed ordinary family events. Then came the final photograph. The last image. The image was blurry. Taken at night. Several people stood near the tunnel entrance. Most faces couldn't be identified. Except one. Hamza Malik, looking directly into the camera. Terrified. The date. Printed on the film edge. June 14, 1988. 9 years before his murder. 6 years before his birth. Omar sat alone examining both photographs side by side. Then noticed something nobody else had seen. In both images, someone else appeared standing behind Hamza. The same man. Partially hidden. Watching. Present in 1988. Present in 1989. And when Omar compared the face against town records, his blood ran cold. Because the man had died in 1974. Most murder investigations begin by finding out who killed the victim. But Detective Omar's nightmare began when he realized someone had been photographing the victim decades before the victim was ever born. Detective Omar didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. The dead man kept appearing. Not in dreams. Not in hallucinations. In evidence. Cold. Documented. Verifiable evidence. Every photograph showed him. Watching. Waiting. The dead man's name. The records identified him as Rashid Akhtar, a local railway worker, 42 years old, officially deceased since 1974. Cause of death: a train accident. Multiple witnesses. Body recovered. Buried in the town cemetery. Open and shut case. And yet, there he was, standing behind Hamza Malik in photographs taken years after his death. The enlargement. Forensic technicians enlarged the images. The results were disturbing. Because Rashid never looked at the camera. Not once. In every photograph. His eyes were fixed on Hamza. Always Hamza. The pattern emerges. Omar searched through every old photograph recovered from the farmhouse. 312 images. Hours of examination. Then he found another one. And another. And another. By sunrise, Rashid Akhtar appeared in 27 separate photographs spanning 15 years. Always in the background. Always unnoticed. Always watching the same empty location where Hamza would later appear. Before Hamza existed. That was the impossible part. Hamza wasn't in the early photographs. He hadn't been born. But Rashid behaved as though he was already there, watching a future victim no one else could see. The grave. Omar ordered Rashid's grave opened. The town council protested. Relatives objected. The cemetery manager threatened legal action. None of it mattered, because Omar needed answers. The coffin. The exhumation occurred 3 days later. Heavy rain. Gray skies. Nervous workers. The coffin was recovered intact. Then opened. And everyone present stopped breathing. Empty. The coffin contained no body. Only dirt. And a single Polaroid photograph. The image inside the coffin. The photograph showed the cemetery itself. The exact grave where they stood. Taken recently. Very recently. Within the last few months. The figure standing near the grave was Rashid Akhtar, wearing the same railway uniform he supposedly died in 50 years earlier. And beside him stood Hamza Malik, alive, looking terrified. The writing. On the back of the Polaroid someone had written, "He finally saw me." The witness returns. The elderly aunt who previously refused to talk suddenly contacted police. She wanted a meeting. Immediately. The story she never told. The woman was 78 now. Hands trembling. Voice weak. But she remembered everything. The summer of 1988. According to her, the town experienced strange events during the summer of 1988. People reported seeing unfamiliar individuals in family photographs. Faces appearing where nobody had been standing. Strangers showing up in old albums. Then disappearing again later. The boy nobody knew. One afternoon, the family gathered for a picnic. The same picnic shown in photograph 47. And several relatives noticed something strange. A teenage boy standing near the fence. Nobody recognized him. Yet nobody questioned it either. Because somehow, everyone assumed he belonged there. The missing memory. Years later, the family realized something terrifying. They remembered seeing the boy, but couldn't remember speaking to him, or hearing him, or watching him arrive. As if he was never really there. The memory felt incomplete. Artificial. Like remembering someone from a dream. The tunnel again. The aunt revealed another secret. The drainage tunnel had a reputation long before Hamza's murder. Disappearances. Strange sightings. Missing animals. Stories passed through generations. Most people ignored them. Until 1988. The photograph taken underground. A local teenager explored the tunnel that year with a camera. He returned terrified. Refused to explain what happened. Then burned most of the photographs. Most. Not all. The surviving image. Police eventually found a copy hidden among old records. The image was nearly destroyed. Smoke damage. Water stains. But one detail remained visible. Deep inside the tunnel stood Rashid Akhtar, and beside him, a teenage Hamza Malik. The date. The photograph was dated 1972. 2 years before Rashid died. 22 years before Hamza was born. Omar's realization. The photographs weren't predicting the future. They were documenting something already happening. Something connected to the tunnel. Something that somehow linked different years together. Late that night, Omar spread every recovered photograph across his office floor. Dozens of images. Different years. Different events. And then he noticed the final pattern. In every photograph, Rashid and Hamza were moving. Not randomly. Closer. Year by year. Picture by picture. Walking deeper toward the drainage tunnel. As though every photograph captured a different step of the same journey. And in the most recent image, they had finally reached the entrank. Some killers stalked their victims for weeks. Some for months. But whatever was waiting inside the tunnel had apparently been following Hamza Malik before either of them should have existed in each other's lives. The drainage tunnel should have been ordinary. Concrete walls. Rusting pipes. A forgotten piece of infrastructure built on the edge of town. Instead, it had become the center of a mystery spanning decades. And every new piece of evidence pointed back to it. The construction records. Detective Omar requested the original engineering files. The town archives produced yellowed blueprints dating back to 1958. The tunnel appeared exactly where it should. Normal dimensions. Normal design. Case closed. Or so it seemed. The missing blueprint. A junior archivist found something strange. One blueprint was missing. Not lost. Removed. The numbering jumped from sheet 11 directly to sheet 13. Sheet 12 had vanished. And according to archive records, it had disappeared in 1972, the same year as the oldest photograph. The engineer's notebook. The chief engineer responsible for the project had kept a personal journal. Most entries discussed construction delays and budgets. Nothing unusual. Until August 3, 1958. That page contained only one sentence. The tunnel is longer at night. The second entry. 3 days later. Workers keep finding sections we didn't build. The last entry, August 11, 1958. The final note before the journal abruptly ended. Do not follow the lights. The missing workers. Omar dug deeper. During construction, 3 laborers vanished. Officially listed as workplace accidents. No bodies recovered. No explanation. The incidents had been forgotten for decades. Until Omar discovered something hidden in the records. The same faces. One of the missing workers looked familiar. Too familiar. Omar compared old photographs. His stomach tightened, because the worker appeared in the background of several later images, taken years after his disappearance. Not older. Not changed. Exactly the same. The tunnel reopens. The sealed entrance still existed on the outskirts of town. Police reopened it under supervision. Floodlights illuminated the darkness. The tunnel stretched ahead silently. Cold air drifted outward, and something felt wrong immediately. Distance doesn't match. Surveyors entered first. They measured carefully. According to blueprints, the tunnel should extend 620 meters. Nothing more. But their instruments disagreed. The tunnel continued far beyond its documented length. Almost twice as far. Impossible geometry. Laser scans became inconsistent. Every measurement produced different results. One scan showed 620 meters. Another showed 1.4 kilometers. A third suggested no visible end at all. Physics itself seemed uncertain. The wall of dates. 300 meters inside. Investigators found writing covering an entire concrete wall. Thousands of dates. Scratched into the surface. Years ranging from 1958 to 2024. Every decade represented. And beside many dates. Names. Missing persons. Accident victims. People connected to unsolved disappearances throughout the region. Hamza's name. Near the center of the wall. Someone had carved. Hamza Malik. 1997. Directly beneath it. Another inscription. Arrived. The new discovery. The wall contained another name too. One Omar had never seen before. His own. Detective Omar Siddiqui 2024. Underneath. Not yet. The team panics. Several officers wanted the tunnel sealed again immediately. Others argued for a full excavation. Nobody agreed. Because nobody could explain Omar's name. or how it reached a wall hidden behind concrete decades before he entered. The camera incident. Investigators installed surveillance equipment throughout the tunnel. 24 cameras. Continuous recording. The footage lasted only 6 hours. Then every camera failed simultaneously. Not from damage. From overload. The final frames. The last recorded images were recovered later. Each camera showed the same thing. A distant figure walking through the darkness. Approaching slowly. Rashid Akhtar, the dead railway worker, moving deeper into the tunnel. Following someone. Who he was following. The blurry figure ahead of him eventually became visible. A teenage boy. Hamza Malik. But something else appeared. Behind Rashid. Another figure emerged. Then another. Then dozens more. People from different decades. Different clothing styles. Different eras. All walking toward the same destination. The procession. It looked less like a crowd. More like a line. A queue extending through time itself. Everyone moving deeper underground. Following Hamza. The photograph taken during the search. One officer snapped pictures while documenting the tunnel. Most appeared normal. Until the final image. The photograph showed the investigation team. Standing together beneath floodlights. But in the background, far behind them, stood a teenage Hamza. Watching. The terrifying detail. Hamza appeared older than in previous photographs. Closer to 16. Closer to the age he was when murdered. As if he were moving through the images alongside them. Approaching something. That night Omar reviewed every photograph ever connected to the case. Spread across his office wall. 1958, 1959, 1960, 1962, 1963, different decades. Different cameras. Different witnesses. Yet every image contained the same tunnel. And every image showed the distance between Hamza and the tunnel entrance growing smaller. Until the most recent photograph, where Hamza stood directly before the opening. One step away from entering. Final line. Most cold cases remain trapped in the past. But Omar was beginning to suspect this one wasn't waiting to be solved. It was slowly unfolding across decades, and the ending hadn't happened yet. Detective Omar stopped treating the photographs as evidence. He started treating them as a timeline. Not a timeline of the past. A timeline of something still happening. Every photograph showed movement. Small movement. Almost invisible. But movement nonetheless. Hamza Malik was getting closer to the tunnel. Year after year. Decade after decade. As though the photographs were capturing moments from a journey that ignored time. The murder night. Omar reopened the original murder investigation from 1997. Thousands of pages. Hundreds of interviews. Most were useless. One witness statement wasn't. A railway maintenance worker named Salman had reported seeing Hamza alive hours after police believed he was already dead. At the time, investigators dismissed him. The timeline didn't fit. Now Omar wasn't so sure. Salman's statement. The interview transcript had been buried deep inside storage records. One paragraph stood out immediately. The boy walked toward the tunnel around midnight. He wasn't alone. The second person. Salman described a man walking several meters behind Hamza. Older. Thin. Wearing a railway uniform. Rashid Akhtar. The impossible witness. At the time, police ignored the description. Because Rashid had supposedly died 23 years earlier. The statement remained forgotten. Until now. The timeline breaks again. Omar compared all known sightings. A disturbing pattern emerged. Witnesses reported seeing Hamza in years before he existed. And Rashid in years after he died. Neither followed normal chronology. Both appeared connected to the tunnel. The audio tape. Evidence storage produced one final item from the original case. An old cassette recording. Never fully analyzed. The quality was terrible. Rain. Static. Wind noise. But investigators had recorded ambient sounds near the tunnel on the night of Hamza's disappearance. The voices. Audio specialists enhanced the recording. Several voices emerged. Most were unintelligible. Then came one clear sentence. A teenage voice. Hamza's voice. Saying, "How many times have I done this already?" The room goes silent. Nobody spoke after hearing it. Because the sentence made no sense. Not for a kidnapping victim. Not for a murder victim. Not for anyone. The next voice. Another voice followed. Older. Calm. Rashid. His reply. More than you remember. The final words on the tape. Several seconds of silence followed. Then Hamza spoke again, this time sounding terrified. What happens when I reach the end? Rashid's answer. The recording ended with 5 words. 5 words that haunted Omar afterward. You become the beginning. The tunnel search continues. Omar returned underground the following evening, this time with only 2 officers. The growing media attention made secrecy impossible. But Omar didn't care anymore. He needed answers. The new passage. 380 meters inside. They discovered something impossible. A side passage. It hadn't appeared on previous surveys. It hadn't appeared on blueprints. It simply existed now. Fresh footprints. Dust covered most of the floor, except for one path. Fresh footprints. A teenager's shoe prints. Leading into the darkness. The date carved into concrete. Near the entrance to the passage, someone had scratched a date into the wall. October 19th, 1997. The exact night Hamza disappeared. The hidden chamber. The passage eventually opened into a circular concrete room. No engineering records mentioned it. No construction plans referenced it. It shouldn't have existed. The photographs. The walls were covered with photographs. Thousands of them. Every decade. Every year. Every season. Pictures pinned from floor to ceiling. One subject. Every photograph showed Hamza Malik. Different ages. Not just 16. Older. Younger. 10 years old. 20 years old. 30 years old. Even elderly. Versions of Hamza spanning an entire lifetime he never lived. The center of the room. At the center stood a wooden table. On it rested a single Polaroid. Still developing. As though it had been taken moments earlier. The image appears. Slowly the chemicals darkened. Shapes emerged. Then faces. The photograph shows Omar, standing in the chamber, looking down at the photograph, taken from somewhere behind him. The figure in the background, and standing directly behind Omar, was Hamza Malik, not 16 anymore. This Hamza appeared middle-aged, tired, older, watching silently. The message, written beneath the image. You finally made it this far. The final discovery. Omar turned around instantly. Nobody stood behind him. The chamber remained empty. Silent. Except for one thing. A fresh photograph slid slowly from a camera mounted high on the wall. The picture was still developing as it fell. And on the white surface, a shape was beginning to appear. A doorway. Deep inside the tunnel. Somewhere farther ahead. A place nobody had reached yet. For 27 years everyone believed Hamza Malik's story ended inside the tunnel. But Omar was beginning to discover something far stranger. The murder might have been only the first step of a journey that was still continuing. The photograph finished developing before Omar could pick it up. He stared at it in silence. A doorway. Concrete walls. Darkness beyond. Nothing unusual at first glance. Except for the date printed at the bottom. October 21st, 2036. 12 years in the future. The impossible photograph. Forensics later confirmed what Omar already feared. The image was authentic. Real photographic chemicals. Real aging process. Real Polaroid stock. No digital manipulation. No forgery. Yet somehow the photograph showed a location that hadn't been photographed yet. The doorway. The picture became the center of the investigation. Omar enlarged it repeatedly, looking for clues, looking for anything. Then he noticed something. Someone was standing inside the darkness beyond the doorway, almost invisible, watching. The face. After enhancement, the figure became clear. A teenage girl, approximately 15 years old. Police databases found no match. Missing person records found no match. Nobody knew who she was. 3 days later, the mystery ended, because the girl was reported missing. Not in 2036. In 2024. The new victim. Her name was Aisha Khan. 15 years old. High school student. Last seen walking home from tutoring classes. Vanished without explanation. The same town. Aisha disappeared less than 3 kilometers from the tunnel. The connection was immediate. And terrifying. Because Omar had already seen her. Inside a photograph dated 12 years in the future. The family photograph. While investigating Aisha's home, police discovered something strange. An old family album. Most pictures appeared normal. Birthdays, school events, family vacations. Then came a photograph from 2011, years before Aisha was born. A familiar figure, standing in the background, near a playground fence, was Hamza Malik, watching. The pattern expands. Omar felt cold, because Hamza was no longer the victim. He was becoming part of the phenomenon itself. The board, the investigation room wall filled rapidly. Photographs, dates, disappearances, strings connecting decades together, and one horrifying pattern emerged. Nearly every unsolved disappearance in the region connected back to the tunnel somehow. The number, there were 38 confirmed disappearances, dating back to 1958. Men, women, children, different backgrounds, different decades. One thing united them. All eventually appeared in photographs taken before they vanished. The future room. Omar returned to the hidden chamber underground. This time alone. The walls remained covered with photographs. Thousands of them. And now he noticed something he had missed before. The victims weren't random. They were organized. By date. The photographs were arranged chronologically. A timeline. A collection. The empty spaces. Between the photographs hung empty hooks. Dozens of them. Places reserved for pictures that didn't exist yet. Names under the hooks. Small handwritten labels sat beneath each empty space. Names. Future names. People who had not disappeared yet. One name stands out. Halfway across the wall Omar saw something that made his heart stop. Omar Siddiqui. No date. Just his name. Waiting. The notebook. Hidden beneath the wooden table lay a leather notebook. Ancient. Water-damaged. Filled with handwriting from multiple people. Dozens of writers. All describing the same thing. The door. Each account mentioned a doorway deeper inside the tunnel. A doorway that shouldn't exist. A doorway that appeared differently for everyone. The first entry. The oldest entry dated 1958. Written by one of the missing construction workers. It contained only a single paragraph. We followed the lights. We found the room. The photographs were already there. The next sentence. Omar read it twice. Then a third time. Because it was impossible. My picture was hanging on the wall before I entered. The survivors. Several notebook entries came from people who escaped. Or claimed to. Every story ended the same way. The warning. Never reach the final room. Why? One survivor attempted an explanation. His writing became frantic near the end. Messy. Shaking. The photographs are not predictions. The final sentence. Beneath it he had written. They are memories. Memories of what? Omar turned the page. But the answer terrified him. The truth according to the notebook. The photographs showed people who had already entered the final room. Not in the future. Not in the past. From the perspective of whatever existed inside the tunnel. Everything had already happened. The chamber grows. As Omar finished reading, he heard a sound. A soft clicking noise. Behind him, he turned slowly. A new photograph was emerging from a camera mounted on the wall. Fresh. Wet. Developing in real time. The image. The picture showed Omar standing inside the chamber, reading the notebook, exactly as he was moments earlier. But there was one difference. In the photograph, someone stood beside him. A teenage girl. Aisha Khan. The message, written beneath the image. She has already reached the next room. Omar left the chamber immediately. Heart racing. Mind spinning. Yet before reaching the tunnel exit, he noticed something scratched into the concrete wall. Words he had somehow missed before. Fresh words, as though written only minutes earlier. The writing. Stop looking at the photographs. Then beneath it, they start looking back. Every investigation eventually reaches a point where the detective fears what he might discover. But Omar was beginning to fear something worse, that whatever lived beyond the final doorway had already discovered him first. Detective Omar locked every photograph inside an evidence room. Steel cabinets. Controlled access. 24-hour surveillance. No exceptions. Because after finding Aisha Khan inside a future-dated photograph, he no longer trusted the evidence. Or reality. The first change. The alteration was discovered 3 days later. A forensic analyst reviewing photograph 47 froze, then called Omar immediately. The image had changed. Not dramatically. Not enough for casual observation. But enough. The position. In the original photograph, Hamza stood near the back fence. Now he stood slightly closer to the camera. Only a few steps. Yet every archived copy showed the new version. Even scans made years earlier. The impossible problem. There was no original image left to compare against. History itself seemed to have updated. Only the analyst remembered the previous version. And soon even she began doubting herself. The security footage. The evidence room cameras revealed something worse. At 2:17 a.m., every photograph remained perfectly still. At 2:18 a.m., the images were different. No movement recorded. No person entered. The transition simply existed between frames. The second photograph. Another image changed that same week. This time the difference was obvious. A 1972 tunnel photograph previously showed Rashid standing alone. Now Hamza stood beside him. Older than before. Closer to the tunnel entrance. The timeline continues. It was happening again. The journey through the photographs was continuing. Even now. The expert. Omar contacted Dr. Nadia Rehman, a specialist in photographic preservation. She spent 2 days reviewing the collection, then refused to be left alone with it. Her observation. She pointed toward several images spread across a table. Look at their eyes. Omar did, and immediately wished he hadn't. The eyes. Across dozens of photographs. Hamza appeared to be looking at different things. Not the camera. Not Rashid. The viewer. The direction of his gaze changed depending on where the photograph was examined, as though he could see whoever was studying him. The missing analyst. The forensic analyst who first noticed the alterations failed to arrive at work one morning. Police searched her apartment. No signs of struggle. No evidence of departure. Only one thing seemed unusual. The wall. Every framed photograph in her apartment had been turned face down. Every single one. Except one. The final picture. A small childhood photograph remained hanging upright. Someone had written a sentence across the glass. In black marker. He knows you can see him now. The hidden camera. Back at the tunnel chamber, Omar discovered another camera. Unlike the others, it wasn't mounted openly. It had been hidden inside the concrete wall itself. Ancient. Dust-covered. Still functioning. The film roll. Inside sat an undeveloped roll of film. The dates printed on the canister ranged from 1964 to 2024. 60 years. One roll. The development. Forensics processed the film carefully. The resulting images became the most important evidence in the entire case. Not photographs. At first glance they appeared ordinary. Then investigators noticed something impossible. Each frame showed the same location. The final room beyond the doorway. Different years. But every image showed a different decade. The room remained unchanged. The people inside changed. The collection. Missing construction workers from 1958. Missing teenagers from 1972. Victims from the 1980s. Victims from the 1990s. Victims from the present day. All standing together. As though time meant nothing there. Aisha appears. In the most recent frame. Aisha Khan stood among them. Alive. Looking frightened. But alive. The message hidden in the frames. Nadia noticed another detail. Each photograph contained subtle hand movements. Tiny differences between images. When arranged sequentially, the victims appeared to be communicating. A sentence. Frame by frame. Gesture by gesture. The message slowly emerged. It took 3 days to decode. The warning. The completed sentence read, "Do not open the last door." The question. If the victims were trapped, why warn people away? What existed beyond the final room that frightened them more than captivity? The tunnel expands again. Survey teams returned to the hidden chamber and discovered something impossible. The chamber had grown. The new corridor. A passage now extended beyond the far wall. A passage that hadn't existed during previous visits. At its end, a faint light glowed. The doorway. The doorway from the photographs. Finally real. Finally visible. The photograph that shouldn't exist. As investigators prepared to approach it, another Polaroid emerged from a wall-mounted camera. Fresh. Still developing. Omar watched the image appear slowly, and felt his blood run cold. Because the photograph showed tomorrow's newspaper. A front-page headline. A photograph of the tunnel. And beneath it, Detective Omar Siddiqui missing. That night Omar sat alone in his office. The future newspaper spread before him. The evidence wall covered in photographs. The tunnel map. The victim list. The notebook. Everything pointed toward the doorway. Everything warned him away from it. Then he noticed one final change. The future newspaper photograph had updated. A new image now appeared beside the headline. The rescue photo. Police standing at the tunnel entrance. And among them, a teenage Hamza Malik, smiling. For months Omar had been trying to solve a murder that happened in 1997. But he was beginning to realize the victim might be the only person who already knew how the story ended. Detective Omar spent the entire night staring at the future newspaper. The headline never changed. Detective Omar Siddiqui missing. The date remained tomorrow. Not next week. Not next month. Tomorrow. The decision. Every piece of evidence pointed toward the same conclusion. The doorway at the end of the tunnel was real. The missing people were connected to it. And somehow, Hamza Malik had reached it decades ago. Whether he wanted to or not. The return to the tunnel. At dawn, Omar assembled a small team. No journalists. No politicians. No outside observers. Only 4 officers. 1 engineer. 1 forensic specialist. And Omar. The corridor. The newly formed passage still existed. Cold air drifted from its depths. The faint light remained visible ahead, and as they moved forward, the tunnel grew quieter. Too quiet. No dripping water. No echoes. No distant traffic vibrations. Nothing. As though sound itself struggled to exist there. The watches stopped. 300 meters into the corridor. Every watch stopped simultaneously. Digital. Mechanical. Phone clocks. All frozen at 11:17 p.m. the same time. Omar recognized the number immediately. Hamza's estimated time of death. The door. Eventually they reached it. A simple wooden door. Completely out of place inside the concrete tunnel. No hinges visible. No frame. Just a door standing where no door should exist. The writing. Carved into the wood. Everyone arrives eventually. The first officer. One officer reached toward the handle. The moment he touched it, he froze. Completely still. Eyes wide. What did you see? The officer stepped backward slowly. Pale. Shaking. Refusing to answer questions. Only repeating one sentence. I saw where I disappear. The door opens. Omar opened it himself. And immediately understood why nobody could explain the tunnel. The room beyond. The space on the other side wasn't a room. It was impossible. A vast landscape stretching beyond sight. Filled with photographs. Millions of them. Floating in darkness. The archive. Every photograph ever taken. Every photograph that would ever be taken. Suspended endlessly. An ocean of captured moments. The missing people. Thousands of figures moved among them. People from different decades. Different eras. Different lives. The missing construction workers. The vanished analyst. Aisha Khan. All alive. All wandering beneath the endless photographs. No one had aged. Victims separated by 70 years stood side by side. Exactly as they had appeared when they vanished. Then Omar saw him. Near the center of the impossible landscape stood Hamza Malik, 16 years old, waiting. The meeting. For 27 years Hamza had been a murder victim. A photograph. A mystery. Now he stood alive before them. His first words. Hamza looked exhausted. Not frightened. Not surprised. Just tired. You're late. The sentence echoed through the endless archive. The truth about Hamza. Omar demanded answers. Hamza nodded slowly. Then pointed upward. Toward the floating photographs. What the tunnel really was. The tunnel wasn't creating disappearances. It wasn't predicting the future. It wasn't haunting the town. It was recording. A place where moments became trapped. Preserved. Stored. The people who vanished. Those who entered the final doorway weren't killed. They became part of the archive. Removed from normal time. Existing between photographs. Why Hamza appeared before birth. Because once someone entered the archive, their entire timeline became visible. Past, future, birth, death, all at once. The dead railway worker. Then Omar asked about Rashid Akhtar. Hamza's expression changed. For the first time, he looked afraid. The real story. Rashid hadn't been following Hamza. Hamza had been following Rashid. For decades. Through photographs. Trying to stop him. The name nobody mentioned. Hamza pointed into the darkness. Far beyond the endless images. Towards something moving. The curator. The true owner of the archive. The thing responsible for the photographs. The thing responsible for the doorway. The purpose. Every archive needs a keeper. And according to Hamza, the current keeper was dying. The chosen replacement. Omar already knew the answer before Hamza spoke. Because his name had been waiting on the wall. Because the future newspaper existed. Because the photographs kept changing. Hamza's final warning. That's why the pictures look different now, Hamza said quietly. The archive is choosing. Choosing what? Hamza stared directly at Omar. Choosing who replaces the curator. Silence filled the endless darkness. Millions of photographs drifted overhead. Frozen memories. Frozen lives. Frozen moments. And somewhere beyond them, something enormous shifted. Watching. Waiting. As the team prepared to leave. A new photograph drifted slowly from above. Landing at Omar's feet. Fresh. Undeveloped. The image appeared gradually. Then became clear. The photograph. It showed Omar standing alone inside the archive. Older. Gray-haired. Surrounded by endless photographs. Watching over them. Exactly where the curator should stand. The message. Written beneath the image. The succession has begun. Omar entered the tunnel searching for a murderer. But beyond the last door he discovered something far worse. The victim had never been the intended target of the mystery. He was. Detective Omar didn't tell the others what truly frightened him. It wasn't the photograph. It wasn't the prediction. It wasn't even the endless archive. It was Hamza's reaction. The moment the photograph appeared showing Omar as the future curator, Hamza looked defeated. Not surprised. Defeated. As though he had seen it happen before. The question. Back inside the archive, Omar confronted him. What aren't you telling me? For several seconds, Hamza said nothing. Then he looked up at the millions of floating photographs. And whispered, You're not the first, Omar. The other photographs. Hamza led him deeper into the archive. Past photographs from decades of disappearances. Past rows of frozen moments. Past entire lifetimes suspended in midair. Eventually they reached a section unlike the others. Every photograph showed the same man. Omar. Hundreds of Omars. Different ages. Different clothing. Different years. Some were detectives. Some weren't. Some looked older. Some looked younger. But every one of them was Omar Siddiqui. Impossible lives. One photograph showed Omar as a teacher. Another as a journalist. Another as an old man standing beside grandchildren. Lives he had never lived. Choices he had never made. Yet somehow they existed. The archive collects possibilities. Hamza finally explained. The archive didn't merely preserve events. It preserved possibilities. Every life that could have happened. Every path not taken. Every decision abandoned. Nothing was truly lost. Everything was stored. The previous curator. Omar asked the obvious question. Who runs this place now? Hamza's expression darkened. Rashid Akhtar. The answer chilled him. The dead railway worker. The man who appeared in every photograph. The man declared dead in 1974. He was never dead. At least not in the conventional sense. According to Hamza, Rashid entered the archive decades ago. And became trapped. Then chosen. The cost of becoming curator. The curator couldn't leave. Couldn't age normally. Couldn't die. But there was a price. The archive slowly erased the curator's identity. Year after year. Memory after memory. Until eventually only the role remained. Rashid forgot himself. That was why Rashid appeared everywhere. He wasn't stalking victims. He was searching. Trying to remember who he used to be. The missing names. Hamza showed Omar another section of the archive. Thousands of photographs floated silently. But unlike the others, these had no names. The forgotten. Former curators. Former keepers. former caretakers, people whose identities had vanished completely, their lives preserved, their names gone. Aisha Khan. Omar found Aisha among them. Alive. Scared. Still trapped. She rushed toward him. Her story. Aisha remembered entering the tunnel. Remembered following strange lights. Remembered reaching the doorway. Then nothing. No escape. Everyone trapped in the archive eventually discovered the same truth. Leaving was almost impossible, because the archive constantly rewrote pathways. Every exit became another corridor. Every corridor became another collection. The newspaper changes again. Back in the real world, officers monitoring evidence discovered a new alteration. The future newspaper no longer read, Detective Omar Siddiqui missing. Now it read, Search for Detective ends. No body found. The article claimed Omar vanished permanently. No remains. No explanation. Case unresolved. The date moves closer. The newspaper date had also changed. Tomorrow became tonight. The curator appears. Deep inside the archive, a figure finally emerged from the darkness. Rashid Akhtar, or what remained of him. Changed. He still looked human. Mostly. But photographs drifted around him constantly, appearing and disappearing like falling leaves. Entire lives orbiting his body. His first words. When Rashid saw Omar, he smiled sadly, then said, I hoped the archive would choose someone else. The offer. Rashid explained the situation directly. The archive required a curator. Without one, the collection would collapse. What happens then? The answer horrified everyone present. Every stored possibility. Every preserved life. Every trapped person. Gone. Forever. Hamza's secret. For 27 years Hamza had been trying to prevent exactly this moment. Not because he feared the archive. Because he feared what happened if it lost its keeper. The final discovery. Before Omar could respond, another photograph drifted from above. Fresh. New. The image showed the tunnel entrance. Police vehicles. Floodlights. Crowds. And one figure stepping into the tunnel. The face. It wasn't Omar. It was someone else. A young police officer from Omar's own investigation team. The message beneath. Written in dark ink. The archive has found a second candidate. For the first time, Rashid looked genuinely afraid. Because the archive had never selected two candidates simultaneously before. And according to Hamza, that had only happened once in recorded history. The last time it happened, an entire section of the archive disappeared, along with everyone trapped inside it. The greatest danger was no longer becoming the curator. It was discovering that the archive itself had started changing the rules. The second candidate's name was Officer Bilal Tariq, 26 years old, 3 years on the force. No connection to the original case. No connection to Hamza Malik. No connection to Rashid Akhtar. Or so everyone believed. The photograph arrives first. By the time police located Bilal, another photograph had already appeared inside the archive. Then another. And another. Each image showed Bilal moving steadily closer to the tunnel. Exactly the way Hamza had once moved through the photographs. Exactly the way Omar had. The impossible timeline. The oldest image dated back to 1983, 8 years before Bilal was born. Yet there he stood in the background of a wedding photograph. Watching. The same pattern. Omar felt sick, because he recognized the progression immediately. The archive wasn't reacting to events. It had been preparing them. For decades. Bilal's memory. When questioned, Bilal finally admitted something strange. Something he had never told anyone. Since childhood, he had dreamed about a tunnel. The same tunnel. The same doorway. The same endless darkness beyond. The dream man. And in every dream, someone waited for him. A man holding a camera. The sketch. Bilal drew the face from memory. The moment Omar saw it, he stopped breathing. It wasn't Rashid. It wasn't Hamza. It was Omar. Older. Gray-haired. Exactly like the future curator photograph. The loop. For the first time, a terrifying possibility emerged. What if the future curator wasn't being selected? What if he had already been selected? Hamza's confession. Inside the archive, Hamza finally revealed the truth he had hidden. The archive did not experience time normally. Past and future existed simultaneously there. The future already exists. Every future curator, every future victim, every future disappearance, already existed somewhere inside the collection. The real meaning of the photographs. The photographs weren't predictions. They were records. Records of events that had already happened from the archive's perspective. The forgotten room. Hamza led Omar deeper than anyone had gone before. Beyond the archive's public sections. Beyond the preserved victims. Beyond the endless photographs. To a sealed chamber. The door marked 0. A single metal door stood there. Unlike every other doorway, this one carried a symbol. A circle. And beneath it, Room 0. The first collection. According to Hamza, every curator eventually discovered Room 0. Most wished they hadn't. Inside, the room contained no photographs, no victims, no archives, only shelves. And boxes. Thousands of boxes. The names. Each box bore a name. Some belonged to missing persons. Some belonged to investigators. Some belonged to people who had never entered the tunnel. Omar finds his own. Near the center sat a box labeled Omar Siddiqui. The contents. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside were photographs. Not of the past. Of his future. The last image. The final photograph showed Omar standing beside Rashid. Serving as curator. Older. Tired. Watching another detective enter the tunnel. The name on the next box. The detective's box already existed. Its label read, Bilal Tariq. The real horror. Omar finally understood. The archive wasn't choosing between candidates. It was following a sequence. One curator, then another, then another. An endless chain. The problem. Bilal should not have been next. Not according to the sequence. Not according to the records. The missing box. Hamza pointed toward an empty space on a shelf. A place where another candidate's box should have stood. Someone was erased. A name had once occupied that location. Now it was gone completely. Even the archive couldn't remember it. Why Rashid was afraid. The archive had never selected Bilal. It selected someone else. Someone who vanished from history entirely. The consequence. The moment that person disappeared, the sequence broke, and the archive began behaving unpredictably. Photographs changed. Timelines shifted. Rules failed. The new photograph. A fresh image drifted down from the darkness. No camera produced it. It simply appeared. The image. The photograph showed Room 0. Destroyed. Shelves overturned. Boxes burning. The archive collapsing around itself. The figure standing there. One person stood inside the destruction, watching calmly. The face. Neither Omar, nor Bilal, nor Rashid, nor Hamza. A stranger. The message. Written across the photograph. He remembered what was removed. For the first time since entering the archive. Hamza looked terrified. Not worried. Not afraid. Terrified. Because he recognized the stranger immediately. And according to him, the man wasn't supposed to exist anymore. The archive had spent decades preserving every possible life. But somewhere in its endless collection, one forgotten person had apparently found a way to come back. The stranger's name was Yusuf Karim. Or at least that was the name Hamza remembered. Barely. Even speaking it seemed difficult. As though the archive resisted the memory itself. The forgotten candidate. Decades earlier, before Rashid became curator, the archive had selected another successor. Yusuf. A school teacher. A husband. A father of 2. An ordinary man. The refusal. Unlike every candidate before him, Yusuf refused. Not out of fear. Not out of selfishness. But because he believed the archive itself was wrong. His argument. According to surviving records, Yusuf asked a simple question. If every life, every possibility, and every memory was preserved, who preserved the people forced to become curator? No answer. The archive had no answer. Because the curator was never part of the collection. The keeper existed outside it. Watching. Recording. Forgetting themselves. The erasure. When Yusuf refused, the archive did something it had never done before. It removed him. Not killed. Not imprisoned. Removed. His photographs vanished. His records disappeared. His place in history dissolved. The mistake. The archive assumed that would end the problem. Instead, It created one. Because Yusuf remembered. The impossible survivor. While the archive forgot him, he retained memory of it. And over decades, he learned something no curator ever had. The weakness. The archive depended on memory. Not electricity. Not machinery. Not time. Memory. What happens when memory fails? A photograph only mattered because someone remembered what it represented. A preserved life only mattered because someone could still recognize it. Without memory, the archive became meaningless. Yusuf's discovery. The archive wasn't preserving reality. It was preserving fear of loss. Humanity's inability to let go. The collapse begins. Standing inside room 0, Omar finally met Yusuf. The forgotten man appeared calm. Not evil. Not violent. Simply tired. His first words. Yusuf looked at Omar, then at Rashid, then at Hamza, and asked, "How long have you been protecting a prison?" "The victims." Yusuf pointed toward the endless collection. Millions of photographs floated silently. Millions of trapped moments. Millions of trapped people. The truth. The archive called it self-preservation. But every preserved life had paid a price. No future. No aging. No growth. Only endless storage. Hamza understands. For 27 years, Hamza had feared the archive's destruction. Because he believed it would erase everyone trapped inside. Yusuf revealed something else. The final door. Deep within the archive existed a path never shown to curators. A path leading outward. Not back to the tunnel. Forward. The choice hidden from everyone. The trapped victims had never been given a choice. Stay preserved forever. Or leave. The archive only offered preservation. Never freedom. Rashid's real fear. Rashid finally admitted why he opposed Yusuf. Not because Yusuf was wrong. Because Rashid could barely remember who he had been before becoming curator. Without the archive, he feared there would be nothing left. The decision. The archive itself began reacting. Photographs trembled. Millions of suspended images shook violently. The collection sensed its own possible end. The last photograph. One final image appeared above room 0. The largest photograph Omar had ever seen. Stretching across the darkness. Inside it stood every missing person connected to the tunnel. Construction workers. Children. Investigators. Aisha. Hamza. Hundreds of others. The question. Written across the image. Preserve or release. The vote. For the first time, the archive allowed choice. Not to curators. To the people trapped inside it. One by one. Victims stepped forward. Some wanted preservation. Fearful of what waited beyond. Others wanted freedom. Willing to face uncertainty. Hamza's choice. After 27 years trapped between photographs. Hamza chose freedom. So did Aisha. So did most of the missing. Rashid's choice. Rashid stood alone for a long time. Then smiled sadly. And chose freedom too. The archive changes. The moment the decision became clear. The endless photographs began opening. Like windows. Like doors. Like moments finally allowed to continue. The release. People walked through. Not into death. Not into oblivion. Into lives. Into futures. Into possibilities. Moving beyond the instant where they had vanished. The final roll. The archive did not collapse. It transformed. No longer a prison. No longer a collection. A library. A place people could leave. And return to. Memory without captivity. 1 year later, the tunnel still existed. But the doorway was gone. The disappearances stopped. The photographs stopped changing. And for the first time in generations, no new names appeared on the wall. Detective Omar Siddiqui. Omar remained with the police force. The case officially stayed unsolved. There was no report capable of explaining the truth. No evidence anyone would believe. Only memories. The final meeting. One evening, while walking through a crowded market, Omar noticed a familiar face. A young man. 16 years old. Hamza Malik. Alive. Smiling. Living a life he never got to have. Hamza recognized him. Then nodded once. Before disappearing into the crowd. Years later, Omar visited the sealed tunnel one final time. Dust covered the entrance. Nature had begun reclaiming it. As he turned to leave, he noticed something resting near the old doorway. A single photograph. The final photograph. The image. It showed nothing extraordinary. Just ordinary people living ordinary lives. Children growing up. Families aging. Friends laughing. Moments continuing. The message. Written on the back. Some memories are meant to be preserved. Some are meant to be lived. The greatest mystery was never what happened inside the tunnel. It was why human beings fear letting go of the moments they love, even when life is waiting for them beyond the photograph.